Hi, welcome to episode 6 of Hacking the Fat Man. First, I want to apologize for some radio silence. It's been several weeks since I actually did an episode. Not that anyone remembers, but in episode 5, I talked about taking a vacation. We took 3 weeks to go to Portugal and Spain, and initially I was planning to skip a week and then do a week or two on the road, and, the difficulties or the challenges I was having, and really it was too much. I brought the equipment, but never really had the opportunity to set up or internet connectivity, or just, to be honest, I was tired. We did a lot. The trip was fantastic. We went to Lisbon first, spent a day up in Porto, um, which is the region where they make port wine. Did a factory tour there, the Sandeman port, and that was really good. That was a lot of fun. And then we stayed in Lisbon for a couple of days. I went down south to Portimao, and actually got in 2 days of scuba diving, 4 dives in the Atlantic. The first dive was crazy. Visibility was zero. It was the first time I've dove where I was blind pretty much the whole time. The second, third, and fourth dives were better. I could see a lot more, and I think I put out on the Hacking the Fat Man video daily diary. I put a couple of those dives in. Then we went to Seville for a couple of days. Beautiful city. And then over to Barcelona to end of the trip. I did end up going up to a beautiful place called Tossa de Mar. That's about an hour and 15 minutes north of Barcelona, and got to dive in the Mediterranean, and that was beautiful. It was a lot of fun. Before I left, just to give you a status update. So before I left, I weighed myself, and I was 240. I didn't do a single fast during the trip. I'm going to be honest, I probably didn't even do a micro fast during the trip. I kind of let myself, I don't want to say go, but it's fake. I wanted to have fun. I've been dieting now for better part of 3 years. And sometimes it's okay to let go. And I did. When I landed, we got in this last Saturday, and I weighed myself Monday, and I was 250, and I freaked. But I calm myself down, realize when you travel, there's a lot of fluid that, especially for me at my age, I get fluid in the legs. And a lot of that was, a lot of the weight was that. I weighed myself this morning and I'm 245. So I, pretty much back to where I was. This is also, remember, after surgery a month ago, I had gained 20 pounds. So I still think I have some fluid floating around. I can still feel it up here. I'm not really too worried about it, but this happens, right? Every day you just kind of wake up and you deal with what life has given you. And so I'm sitting at 245 right now. I'll just continue to work on it. Hopefully the goal is still to, by the end of the year, get close to 200, or at least under 220. So I'm still working on that. And yeah, the break also, the some interesting things happened during the trip. One is I still have a problem taking my supplements when I travel. I had packed it. I had done the daily, sorted them, done the daily organizers, and I still probably only took about a third of the supplements I should have been taking through the whole trip. And as the trip progressed, I started noticing that I started having some bad thoughts. Not bad thoughts, not bad thoughts, but just, I was getting tired, and I was getting I can't really explain it. Anyway, didn't want to do the supplements. Started having thoughts. I probably had more refined carbohydrates during this trip than I've had in the last 2 years combined, but it was good. I'm in a country that I may not get to again. Hopefully I will at some point, but I'm going to enjoy the food. I'm going to enjoy the cuisine. All in all, I think I was, for a vacation, overall pretty good. The refined carbs and the alcohol is probably what led to me not losing weight. Because the 5 dives I did actually was pretty heavy exercise. So even given all that and not losing weight, and coming in neutral, I guess, that's fun things. The other thing is, and it gave me some time to think about it. I was thinking about this. I was getting frustrated that I couldn't do the podcast, and I realized I don't know how to describe it. I'd started to make this into something more than I originally intended. I started, I've got to do research and I've got to have something interesting to say. And I still hope this is interesting, but it wasn't really the reason why I started this podcast. Going back to episode 1 when I talked about it, I started this because I really am not. I'm getting better at it, but I wasn't sure of why the diet was working at this point, right? I had spent my whole life dieting. I talked to you guys. I was a swimmer. I was a water polo player. And yet somehow this is all starting to work and work naturally. And there was a lot of thought put into it, right? I made sure that it was part of my life, part of every day, and it's got to be easy and it's got to bring me joy and all the things that we've talked about in the previous episodes. But I really wasn't quite sure why it was working. And ultimately, once I get down to my goal, right? I'm not going to say I'm not near my goal. I've lost over 300 pounds. Yay. But I still have another 60 to go, 70. And, and I've talked about this before, is at some point I'm going to stop looking at pounds, my weight, and start focusing on my fat percentage. And I'm thinking somewhere in the 15% fat range or 12%, something like that. I don't think I've ever, actually, I was going to say I've never been under 20% fat ratio, but my sophomore year, I definitely was, but my sophomore year in high school, I had a 29-inch waist and I was basically starving myself. I was anorexic, I was bulimic, I was going weeks without food and still working out, completely stupid. So anyway, but the goal is to get down, get my fat percentage down, and at that point, I think is when I say, okay, I've arrived. I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. Yeah. So, so thinking back on this and spending the time during the vacation and thinking about what I've been doing here with the podcast. Yeah, I really, at that point, once I get to the goal, whatever that goal is, I plan on writing a book about it, right? And at that point, I'll put in recipes and I'll put in things like that. And so the original idea of this podcast was just to help me record this last little bit, the 60 pounds that I have left. I have to transition from being in weight loss mode, even though, I keep saying that it needs to be an everyday thing. But at some point, I'll stop being in weight loss and start being in maintenance mode. At that point, do I continue to take the Zepbound? These are still questions I have. Do I cut back on the Zepbound? And so I really wanted to do this podcast to help me document that. And I hope, that all of you will want to join me on this just to see if I actually make it. But yeah, I was starting to cut corners a little bit. Not cut corners, but it's one of those things where, like, if you have a weekly check-in, I was trying to be more than I was ready to be here. This is not even a side gig for me. I'm doing this in my spare time. Half the time I'm actually talking to myself. Though I hope you get value out of what I'm discussing. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of reset expectation. If I miss a couple weeks, it's okay. My apologies if you're really into hearing me talk, but I will try to do this weekly. Like I said, I want to document what I faced during the week, and in a year from now, be able to go through these and use this information and this what I've captured as the basis for a book. So you get to come along with me on that. You'll be like, hey, when you read the book, you'll be like, hey, I remember when Drew was actually dealing with this and talking about it. So on that, I've kind of given you a status. I'm sitting at 245. I'm happy with that in the sense of, well, I'm much happier with 245 than 255. That did worry me. I had a moment of, yeah, it was a bad moment. Monday was not a good day for me. In fact, I was trying to fast that day and I just happened to weigh myself. I was like, let me see where I was. Even though in my head, I knew that I had gained liquid in the body. I had swelling, and I'm like, let's just see where I am. And I was not expecting 250. Less than 5 days later, I'm at 245. So, and I've had one fast day this week, one micro fast day. Pretty much it's been a standard week, as I've discussed. So Monday I try to micro or fast. If I can't do it Monday, then I fast Tuesday. I then do a micro fast. Micro fasts are, just to remind everyone, a micro fast to me, by my definition, is somewhere between 500 and 1,200 calories, or 1,000 calories. So I've had two of those this week. I've had a couple of keto days, where I focus just solely on protein, and we're heading into the weekend, and I'll probably just stick with keto. I'm going to try to be a little bit better than I've been. Obviously, over the last 3 weeks, I have not been good at all. So I'll get back to that. So yeah, this week was pretty challenging. I mean, I'm coming off the travel. I'm tired. It took a lot out of me. My feet are swollen. My legs are swollen. You know, the flight from Barcelona, we flew from Barcelona. That's a 2.5 hour flight to London. We had a 5 hour layover in London. This is the flight back. A 5 hour layover in London, and then we had the 12 hours from London to LA. And then I had to get back on a plane the next day, fly out to my sister-in-law's in Vegas so that I can get my car and my dogs and drive home. And if you've ever driven out of Vegas on a Sunday, it's always bad. This day it was a lot worse than I had ever seen it on that, outside of a holiday weekend. There were literally 7 accidents. It took me 7 hours to drive the puppies back home. So I was pretty exhausted by the time Monday came. And then stepping on the scale, which I probably shouldn't have done, even though I knew better than that. And getting that result, it sent me into a spiral. I'm not going to lie. I got very frustrated. And after a while, I just calmed down. I thought about what everything that was going on, and just got this, and I think I talked about this in episode 2 or 3, where consistency isn't consistently going down. There's never a straight line. There's always ups and downs. Life's full of it. We know this. Is ups and downs. Consistency is about making that decision every single day, whatever you're facing, to go and tackle it. And by the time Monday afternoon came around, I went, okay, I haven't fasted pretty much for the month of July. I haven't been doing any lemon water for the better part of 4 weeks. I had some lemon water or some citrus while I was in Portugal and Spain, but it wasn't the daily consistent that I've been doing. And I swear by it. I actually think it helps with my appetite control, along with the supplements. I think the supplements also help with my mood. And so I had just gotten myself all out of whack. And so Monday evening, I just stopped and I went and made myself some lemon water. Went and took my supplements. Went to sleep, slept great because I was exhausted. And then every day I've just been repeating that. I haven't been doing the daily video diaries yet. I'll probably wait. I've got a couple of things coming up next week that it's my 40th high school reunion. So I'm heading down to my hometown of Costa Mesa, California. Go Mustangs. And seeing some friends I haven't seen in a very long time. So again, another week of, I'll try to be good. I'll be good for the most part, but yeah, probably not a time I really want to put a camera on myself. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Now, I'll probably won't be doing that. So yeah, that's been the week. It's been very challenging, and again, I just am reminding myself that I need to make this commitment every single day, and that you can't you can take a day off now and again, but at some point, I will not be gaining weight again. So that the 255 was kind of a wake up call for me. Not a wake up call, but it was a wake up call. It was wait a minute, we're not doing this. We're not going back up in weight. Absolutely not. And I just kind of redoubled down and made that commitment again. So looking forward to it. I'm feeling good. I'm happy. Like I said, 5 days, 245. Did I lose 10 pounds? No, it wasn't fat. It was just water retention. I suspect I gained maybe a pound or two from the vacation. So During the trip, I try to stay up on my reading, looking for articles talking about weight loss or specifically around either keto, cyclical keto, or intermittent fasting or fasting. And one came out, actually, it came out July 30th, that was pretty interesting. I've had questions over the years. So I mentioned that I swam and played water polo, and I was anorexic and bulimic during that time. So one of the things that's always bothered me, not bothered me, but I had questions about was supposedly you can't build muscle without a caloric overage. If you want to build muscle, you have to eat more than your body expends, and then do the workouts, and then you get to build muscle. Obviously, if you want to lose weight, and I've talked about this in the prior podcast, that I think it's like 3,500 calories. You have to be in a deficit for every 3,500 calories for every pound. And so if you're in a caloric deficit, which is what I've been doing, then you'll lose weight. But one of the things I've never really understood was, well, that's all timing, right? So I eat fairly big meals. When I do eat, I eat fairly big meals. I'm not the 200 to 300 calorie meal. I tend to go for 500 to 600 calories per meal. Sometimes I'll even go up to 1,200 calories, depending on what kind of day it is and what I'm feeling. So anyway, I came across this article that touched upon it. It's out of Men's Health, published on July 30th. It's by Andrew Heffernan and Corey Ritchie, and medically reviewed by Aaron Kinney. And they are talking about, well, the title is, let me make sure I can see it, What to Know About Intermittent Fasting and Your Workouts. They worked with Luka Doncic, Lakers, over the summer, who was doing intermittent fasting to help get in better shape, but then also was trying to work out. And so they actually touched upon this. And so there were some interesting things that I got about it. So first is definition of intermittent fasting. There's a lot of different types of fasting. I use the term microfast, and I'm going to be honest, I invented it. I don't even know if it's a real thing. It is a real thing because it is to me, right? And a microfast to me is I'm fasting, but I'm going to stay within a very limited range of 500 to 1,000 calories. Intermittent fasting is pretty much what I do every single day that's not a pure fasting day. And what I mean by that is, so intermittent fasting, there's different schedules that can be intermittent fasting, but the most basic one is you only eat for an 8-hour period, during an 8-hour period during the day. And I've talked about that. I tend to get most of my calories in the morning or early afternoon. And by 4 or 5 o'clock, if I haven't eaten or I don't have any calories or try not to have any calories after 5 o'clock. So that's intermittent fasting is just this. You fast for 16 hours, you eat for 8 hours. So that was interesting to me that there's actually makes sense, a definition out there for it. They go into the benefits of it, and I've talked about it. By restricting our calories, getting our calories earlier in the day, we tend to avoid I ate at 8 o'clock at night, I had 800 calories, I go to sleep, and that's all just going to turn to fat. So we tend to use more of the calories for exercise or for activities, and it helps us reduce, for me personally, it helps reduce the weight. But it also, there's evidence that, I found it helps lower my blood pressure. At my peak weight, I think my A1C was 6.7, which is literally walking into I'm 6.8 is diabetes, or at least that's what my doctor said. So I was walking through the way he put it was I was in the doorway, heading towards diabetes. Last time I had it measured was April, and I was 5'3", and so that's going well. But it can also help with diabetes or lower your blood pressure. The one interesting thing was it says it helps maintain muscle mass. And they kind of get into why that is a little bit. Basically, by doing the intermittent fasting, the 16-8, or whatever version of intermittent fasting you're doing, it helps preserve the muscle mass because you're not totally starving yourself. And your body tends to 16 hours is not the point where your body's going to start devouring muscle. But they do talk later on that if your goal is to maximize muscle, intermittent fasting is, there are some, what they call them, roadblocks or some potholes that you got to watch out for. And really, if you think about it, I went what they said was it makes sense. Basically, you don't want to do your workouts at hour 15 of your fast, because your body's not there, and your calories aren't there, the carbohydrates aren't there, and you could burn muscle faster. Their suggestion was that you sandwich, pun intended, your eating between your workouts. So if you are going to work out, you should eat just before the workout, and then you should do your recovery thing, and that should all be within the 8 hour window of your intermittent your eating portion of your intermittent fast. And the other thing that I found interesting, and I'm going to research a little bit more, was they were saying that even though you you're fasting and you're in a caloric deprivation, that lifting weights, even in that state, actually helps preserve muscle. And that's something they don't really go into it much further there, but that's an interesting why that sort of makes sense to me. But I just said earlier that if you did something, if you tried to lift at hour 15 of your fast, you might burn more muscle. So anyway, I gotta research that a little bit more. But that was another interesting takeaway out of the article. So yeah, basically they say eat before you lift weights, sandwich your workout between the meals. But they also then said that you can do cardio, that it's more of the lifting and the trying to gain muscle, but cardio on a fast or in the middle of a fast is fine. Cardio doesn't really and I'm taking cardio as running, biking, anything like that, doesn't really burn down the muscle, so that is okay to do cardio during a fasting. This was all just interesting for me, in the sense of, as I'm starting to, I've talked about the dives that I did. That's really kind of my future. I absolutely 100% love scuba diving. I am in my natural habitat in the water. I still have things I need to work on. My knees still aren't there yet. A year ago, I was walking with a cane. I don't need the cane anymore, but I was having problems carrying the scuba gear and getting out of the water. That's still an issue for. We were in Plaza de Mar. It was a shore dive. In Portimao, it was pontoon boats, a boat dive. So anyway, so I still have things to work on, but as I'm starting to move into a more active lifestyle, up until now, I 300 pounds. I barely, outside of just doing gardening and getting up and moving, I haven't really done activities. I haven't done the exercise, and I've talked about this in the previous podcast. Right? You can, if you're exercising just to lose weight, you're doing it wrong. I want to exercise. I want to do activities that I enjoy, that bring me happiness. I don't want to have to get up and I've got to run 3 miles today because my diet requires me to run 3 miles. I'm never going to do that again. I'll go run 3 miles to help my knees so that I can go do shore diving. I know it just mind games, but it matters to me. So as I move into it, so these are interesting, and it's been a long time question I've had of, I think I built muscle even when I was fasting, and now this kind of explains it. Was most of the time, even in my youth, in my 20s, in college, I tended to eat. Actually, very rarely did I eat before. If you've ever done some hardcore swimming or some hardcore audio, eating is never a good thing because you'll end up just throwing it up. So I tended to eat, but I would eat immediately after, and I think that's why I was able to. I knew I had built muscle and lost weight, and so it was a question I have, and this kind of helped me understand and think about what it is and why that happened. So help answer some question. Anyway, interesting that Luca is doing the intermittent fasting. Also, now that I understand the definition of intermittent fasting, I realize outside of a pure fasting day, I'm doing it every single day, even on the days I say that it's free reign, on a Saturday or Sunday, I'm still limiting it to the 8 hour window. I very rarely will have anything. If I know I'm going to a party or a dinner for something, I know that dinner is 6 o'clock, I probably won't eat anything until then. And even then, I'll keep it under 1,000 calories. So I technically still is. Yes, it's late in the evening. Yes, I could tend. That's why I kind of tend to, if it's a late dinner, late meal in the evening, I tend to make sure to not quite eat as much as I do, or as I could. Anyway, found it interesting. More articles on intermittent fasting, more articles on the exercise and how it all works. So that's it. That was this week. We'll see what next week's like I said, next week I'm heading down to my hometown, Costa Mesa. I'm going to be down there, and for my 40th high school reunion. Yes, I'm old. I look forward to having some good times with people and seeing everyone. So anyway, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week. All right, cheers.